She passed by twice holding their hands, said they were her grandkids.
When I heard the news, I just stood there. Couldn't say a word. From day one, I believed they were still alive.
Lilly and Jack Sullivan have been found, safe and alive in a remote forest cabin nearly a month after their disappearance.
These statements were never actually broadcast, but they've played out countless times in the minds of many. They're not just imagined quotes. They are quiet hopes, even desperate ones, whispered by millions of strangers. The hope that these two children are still alive, that perhaps someone took them, not to harm, but for some other reason. A misguided decision born from a protective instinct. From the very beginning of this case, there has been no solid evidence pointing to their deaths. No blood, no screams, no signs of struggle, not even a torn piece of clothing. The back door was found ajar, like something out of a crime novel, offering no real answers, only possibilities. Search dogs lost their scent near a road leading to the highway. No witnesses saw anything. No vehicles were heard. All that remained was a silence. Too perfect, too clean to ignore. That's why deep down so many people haven't let go. There's a stubborn part of us that refuses to accept finality without proof, because sometimes what we don't find doesn't mean the worst has happened. Sometimes silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of something still hidden. And that's where the theories began to form, not just from law enforcement, but from independent investigators, journalists, and the public. Each theory a shard of potential truth, each path suggesting one shared possibility, that Lilly and Jack Sullivan are not gone forever. They've simply been kept from the light. Now let us examine the reasons that lead us to believe that, fragile as it may seem, these two children might still be alive after more than a month of searching.
When dogs lose the trail that cleanly, it's not luck, it's timing. Someone picked them up fast, like they've done it before.
Cleanest disappearances often leave no trace, because the paper trail was built before the child ever vanished.
In the more than 1 month since Lilly and Jack Sullivan were reported missing, police have yet to release any evidence indicating how the two children left the home. No bodies, no blood. And to date, no clear signs that a crime has even taken place. Yet there are no indications that the children left voluntarily either. The house was not disturbed. The back door was reportedly open, but no specific details have been released about forced entry. In the absence of concrete information, one theory remains under consideration. Lilly and Jack may have been taken, quietly, deliberately, and without leaving a trace. This isn't an unfamiliar scenario in missing children cases. A lack of evidence does not mean nothing happened. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann from a resort in Portugal in 2007 remains one of the most well-known examples. She vanished from her bedroom while her parents dined just a short distance away. There were no screams, no obvious signs of forced entry. Yet, 15 years later, investigators continue to lean toward abduction, possibly by someone local or even an organized trafficking group. Closer to home, in 2014, the disappearance of 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents shook Calgary. Initially, there were no bodies, no video surveillance, and no eyewitnesses. For weeks, the prevailing hope was that Nathan had simply been taken and would be returned safely. While that case later led to a homicide conviction, it demonstrated how the absence of visible evidence often fuels early hope and legitimate theories that the missing might still be alive. It is this same context that keeps the abduction theory on the table in the Sullivan case. It implies that someone may have had both the reason and the means to take the children without drawing attention. Not for ransom. There has been no demand. Not out of revenge. There's no known conflict. But perhaps for personal psychological motives, or a misguided belief that the children needed to be somewhere else. This remains a theory. Authorities in Canada have not confirmed that Lilly and Jack were abducted. but they have not ruled it out either. In cases like this, where time passes without signs of violence or death, the possibility of survival becomes harder to dismiss. And for many watching the case unfold, that is the last thread of hope, that the children are not lost forever, but simply somewhere not yet found.
It's not always a stranger. Sometimes it's family. And that's what makes it harder to see coming.
Some disappearances involve no force, no struggle, just trust, quietly exploited.
In any missing child case, investigators often begin by looking inward, starting with those closest to the victims. Sometimes it's not a stranger lurking in the shadows, but a family member, quietly harboring a belief that they know what's best for the child, and acting on it without warning. In the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, no evidence has been made public suggesting any family member is involved, but investigators have not ruled out the possibility. Immediate and extended relatives, those who may have previously been caregivers, are always considered as part of a comprehensive search strategy. These are individuals who could approach the children without raising suspicion, and who may have had personal motives to remove them from their home. One such precedent occurred in Wisconsin in 2018, when 2-year-old Noelani Robinson went missing following the murder of her mother. The abductor was identified as the child's biological father, who had previously lost custody in court. Although the case ended tragically, it underscored a key reality. Those with familial ties who feel excluded from a child's life sometimes take matters into their own hands, regardless of the law. Another case in Canada in 2004 involved a grandfather who took his 2 grandsons from British Columbia and hid them for nearly 10 months after a legal custody dispute with their mother. During that time, he created an entirely new routine for the boys, not to harm them, but to raise them himself under the belief that the court had made the wrong decision. After being discovered, he admitted that he never trusted the system to decide what was right for his grandchildren. In the Sullivan case, no public information suggests an active custody dispute, but that does not eliminate the possibility of private tensions within the family. In many real-world cases, such disputes only come to light after an investigation uncovers past court filings, restraining orders, or closed family court records. Emotional fractures often remain hidden beneath the surface until forced into view. This theory is not meant to cast blame. It simply reflects a plausible path of inquiry, particularly if the children left the house without signs of struggle or forced entry. If they were taken by someone they trusted, and that person had a familial bond, the decision to keep them hidden might not stem from criminal intent, but from a deeply personal, albeit misguided, desire to reclaim or protect. And it's exactly this possibility that offers one of the clearest reasons to still believe the children are alive. If Lilly and Jack were taken by a relative, not a predator, not a trafficker, but someone who felt they were doing the right thing, then the odds of survival rise significantly. There's no motive to harm them. The goal, however flawed, may be to care for them. Among the darker possibilities this case presents, this remains one of the few that carries a flicker of light. Faint, perhaps, but powerful enough to keep hope alive.
Sometimes a mother doesn't vanish to escape justice. She vanishes to escape life.
Not every disappearance is a crime. Some are carefully planned exits.
In any child disappearance where no physical evidence is found, investigators are often forced to consider an uncomfortable question. Did someone within the family orchestrate the event, not to harm, but to leave voluntarily with the children? In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, no evidence has been released to suggest the mother was involved in the children's disappearance, nor is there any indication that she planned to relocate with them. However, in the absence of signs pointing to an external criminal act, the theory that a parent may have chosen to leave and intentionally created a misleading scene remains within the realm of investigative possibilities. This theory is not new. Real-world cases have shown that some parents create the illusion of disappearance not to cover up a crime, but to escape their current lives, to start over elsewhere with their children. One example is the 2017 case of Tanya Ryder in Washington State. Her car was found abandoned, and she was declared missing, prompting a multi-agency search. Days later, she was located alive, having voluntarily disappeared due to emotional and personal reasons related to stress and family pressures. She hadn't been kidnapped or harmed, she had simply left. Another relevant case is that of Casey Hathaway, a 3-year-old boy who vanished in North Carolina in 2019. For 3 days, the public feared the worst: kidnapping, drowning, or foul play. When he was found alive in the woods, he told a strange story about being with a bear. His case served as a reminder that not all disappearances are criminal in nature. Some arise from spontaneous behavior, either by children or those caring for them. Applying this lens to the Sullivan case, it is important to emphasize that there is no evidence suggesting the mother acted improperly. But if there were internal pressures, emotional strain, fear, or a desire to retreat from social circumstances, then the possibility of a parent choosing to disappear with their children becomes psychologically plausible, if not legally justifiable. In such scenarios, the question is not who took the children, but where are they and why haven't they been found? If the mother did take the children, and if her reason was to begin again in secret, then there is a strong likelihood that both children are alive, cared for, and still very much loved, but simply hidden from view for now. It is not an easy theory to accept. It implies deception by the one person the public instinctively trusts most in a case like this. But if that deception stems from desperation, not malice, then it offers one of the strongest cases for hope. The children weren't taken by strangers. They weren't trafficked. They weren't lost. They were protected, at least in the eyes of someone who believes they're doing what's best. Among all the scenarios currently considered, this is one of the few that keeps the flame of hope burning, that perhaps we haven't found them yet, not because it's too late, but because someone is still trying to keep them hidden, out of love.
When a child trusts you, you don't need to force them. They'll follow, willingly.
The most dangerous kidnappers don't see themselves as criminals. They see themselves as saviors.
Not every child disappearance begins with a scream or a struggle. Some vanish without a sound because they didn't resist. No one forced them. No one threatened. A child simply walks out the door, hand in hand with someone familiar, someone kind, someone who once made them laugh, and then they never come back. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, there is no evidence confirming that the children left with someone they knew. However, the absence of forced entry or any signs of a struggle leaves this theory open to consideration. If someone familiar, perhaps a former babysitter, a neighbor, or a family friend, approached at just the right time, it's entirely possible the children left willingly, never suspecting danger. A real-world example occurred in 2012 in New Zealand. Stephanie Scott, a 9-year-old girl, disappeared after walking off with an older woman she believed was her mother's aunt. The woman had once lived nearby when Stephanie was younger. For nearly 3 weeks, Stephanie stayed in the woman's home, was fed, clothed, and cared for. When authorities found her, she didn't realize she had been missing. To her, it had just been an extended visit. Not frightening, not forced. More recently, in 2020 in Ontario, a woman in her 40s, who had previously volunteered at a summer camp, took in 2 children and kept them in her home for 11 days without anyone knowing. There was no ransom, no abuse. When questioned, she simply said, "I thought I could take better care of them." During that time, the children were fed, taught how to draw, and lived in a calm environment. Cases like these are rare, but they do exist. They remind us that not every disappearance is rooted in malice. Sometimes it's driven by misguided affection, a mental health disorder, or a twisted sense of rescue. And if this is what happened to Lilly and Jack, if they followed someone they once trusted, someone who may have been close to the family, then it's not just plausible. It may be one of the more hopeful explanations we have. In these types of disappearances, children are not harmed. They're hidden, not for ransom, not for revenge, but because someone believes they are doing the right thing by giving the children a better life or fulfilling their own unmet emotional need. In many of these cases, the children are well-fed, sheltered, and survive, at least for a while. If Lilly and Jack followed someone like that, perhaps a former caregiver, a neighbor, or a forgotten acquaintance, they may still be alive, still sleeping in beds, still hearing bedtime stories, unaware that the world is looking for them. And the person keeping them, whoever they are, has no intention of bringing them into the light. That's why, among the many theories, this one remains especially powerful. It doesn't require violence to make sense. It doesn't involve organized crime or strangers in the night. Just trust, misplaced, but real. And for that reason, it may also carry one of the strongest hopes, that Lilly and Jack aren't lost forever. They simply followed someone they believed in and haven't looked back.
Some vanish without a trace, not because of force, but because someone knew exactly how to avoid leaving one.
When a child disappears without leaving any trace, no camera footage, no screams, no dropped belongings, one of the most serious and disturbing theories must be considered: human trafficking. Not because it's the most likely scenario, but because a total absence of evidence often aligns with the patterns of highly organized networks, the kind that have operated for decades in neighborhoods, rural towns, and cities once thought safe. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, there is no evidence confirming this was a trafficking incident. No suspicious vehicles captured on video, no strangers reported in the area. But for the very reason that no concrete lead has emerged, this theory cannot be ruled out. In many real-life cases, children have vanished without anyone ever seeing them leave, and it took months or even years for the first clue to emerge. One of the most well-known examples is the 2002 abduction of Elizabeth Smart in the U.S. She was taken from her bedroom by a man in disguise and held for 9 months just miles from her home. She was controlled, silenced, and moved through public areas, yet no one recognized her. Her case proved that victims can be hidden in plain sight, and the absence of chaos doesn't mean the absence of crime. In Canada, the 2014 disappearance of Michaela Bali, 16, in Saskatchewan remains unsolved. Surveillance footage showed her speaking to a stranger at a bus terminal and then vanishing. Though no one has confirmed she was trafficked, investigators haven't ruled out the possibility. Her case fits the profile: a clean disappearance, no violence, and no final clue. Trafficking, especially when it involves children, doesn't only occur in war-torn or impoverished countries. It exists in developed nations under polished surfaces. And in most cases involving children under 10, traffickers often keep victims alive for weeks or months, watching them, grooming them, sometimes falsifying documents before transporting them across borders or into underground markets. If Lilly and Jack were taken into such a system, something that remains unproven but logically possible, then the likelihood that they are still alive is disturbingly high. They would not be killed immediately. They would not be abused publicly. They would be hidden, stripped of identity, but preserved for their perceived value within that system. It is precisely for that reason that this theory, while grim, cannot be dismissed as hopeless. If they have been absorbed into such a structure, they are still somewhere, waiting for a slip-up, a misstep, a random encounter, or a stranger's alert eyes. Hope, in this scenario, is not emotional. It's statistical, because countless real-life cases have proven that trafficking victims, though hidden, have been found alive, sometimes after months, sometimes after years. And until there is no hope left to chase, this theory preserves the most critical belief of all, that Lilly and Jack Sullivan may still be alive.
In some cases, the motive isn't connection, it's retaliation. And the impact goes far beyond the missing.
To the abductor, the child becomes a message, not to love, but to wound someone else.
Not all child abduction cases begin with greed, lust, or even affection. Some are born out of something colder, hatred directed at the parents. In these cases, the child becomes a pawn, a symbol, a method of revenge. And the message is chillingly simple. I'm going to hurt you in the most permanent way, by taking away what you love most. There is currently no evidence that anyone close to Lilly and Jack Sullivan's family harbored such resentment or was involved in their disappearance. But in many real cases, the perpetrator wasn't a stranger. It was someone the family knew, someone who had once been welcomed, only to return later with quiet vengeance. Criminal profilers have long studied a specific abduction pattern that doesn't stem from desire to own or raise a child, but rather from a twisted need to punish the adults. The abductors in these scenarios often believe they are rescuing the children, but their true goal is emotional destruction. In the 1987 case of Carlina White, she was taken as an infant by Ann Petway, a woman who had suffered multiple miscarriages. Petway pretended to be a nurse and abducted the baby from a hospital. Her motive wasn't pure maternal instinct, it was retaliation. According to her own confession, I wanted to prove to my ex I wasn't worthless. For 23 years, she raised the child under a false identity, disguising her crime under a cloak of care. A similar case occurred in Spain in 2018, where a former friend of the child's mother, feeling cut off and betrayed, abducted the child without remorse. "She doesn't deserve him," the woman said. "I'm giving him a better life." In both cases, the abductor believed they were the better parent, the rightful guardian, not out of love, but out of personal vendetta. The child became a living reminder of a grudge. If this theory applies to Lilly and Jack Sullivan, it suggests a perpetrator who once had access to the family's life, a neighbor, a former babysitter, a friend turned enemy, someone who felt discarded, someone who convinced themselves the children would be better off away from their real parents. But beneath that justification lies something far more dangerous, a silent war against the adults. And paradoxically, that could be good news for Lilly and Jack, because in most cases of this nature, children are not harmed physically. They are hidden, renamed, raised in secret, but they're alive because their very existence is part of the punishment. Their survival is part of the story the abductor is telling themselves, which is why this theory, as twisted as it is, still leaves room for hope. If Lilly and Jack were taken by someone who saw themselves not as a criminal, but as a savior, then they are very likely still alive, living in shadows, under new names, in a reality built on lies, but breathing, growing, waiting.
Cleanest disappearances often leave no trace, because the paper trail was built before the child ever vanished.
In rare cases, it's not the child who disappears, it's their identity that gets replaced.
Some disappearances don't come with screams, no blood, no crime scene, just a quiet vanishing, so methodical it feels almost clinical. In these cases, the child isn't harmed. They're not abandoned. They're reborn, with a new name, new documents, new parents, and a life that deliberately erases every trace of who they once were. Under this theory, Lilly and Jack weren't killed. They weren't left behind. They were taken, moved thousands of kilometers away from their original home to avoid recognition, suspicion, or any connection to the life they once had. Whoever orchestrated it wasn't acting randomly. They understood the system, how to create fake birth certificates, how to build a new identity that looks completely legal. There are real-life precedents. In Brazil, in 2012, police dismantled a child trafficking network that created false documents for dozens of children and placed them with wealthy families. These children were not harmed. They were healthy, safe, but living someone else's life. In the United States, the case of Paul Fronczak sent shockwaves through the country. In 1964, a baby was abducted from a hospital. A child found later was believed to be him and returned to the grieving parents. But decades later, DNA testing revealed that the boy was not their son. To this day, Paul's true identity remains a mystery. These identity swap operations don't aim for ransom or cruelty. Their goal is simple: make the child disappear from public records legally and permanently. No school files, no hospital records, nothing that can trace back to their former selves. If this theory holds true, it actually increases the likelihood that Lilly and Jack are still alive. They weren't discarded, they were repurposed into new lives. And that means the search must go beyond missing posters. It must dig into anomalies in paperwork, strange adoption histories, or quiet changes in local records. Because all it takes is one mistake: a missed vaccine entry, an irregular DNA test result, or a child who starts to ask the wrong questions, and the carefully constructed lie begins to crack. And with that crack, the truth might finally emerge.
The public doesn't cling to hope blindly. They cling to it because nothing has said, "Stop looking."
You don't stop searching because time passed. You stop when there's nothing left to find, and we're not there yet.
From the moment the names Lilly and Jack Sullivan appeared on the news, their disappearance ceased to be just a family's tragedy. It became a nationwide question, one with no answer, that millions have followed with quiet urgency, clinging to every search update, every possible lead, every subtle shift in police tone. We have explored 7 theories. Some are as sharp as steel, others as vague as smoke. Yet they all orbit a central truth. There is no conclusive evidence that the children are dead. And because of that, the belief that they may still be alive, however fragile, continues to burn quietly in the hearts of all who care. We've seen cases where missing victims were found alive months, even years later, because someone spotted a face, heard a familiar phrase, or noticed a detail that once seemed meaningless. A lack of closure doesn't mark the end. It signals that the search still has purpose. And in that pause between doubt and despair, hope has not vanished. Maybe Lilly and Jack no longer remember the street they once lived on. Maybe someone took them, not to hide a crime, but to shield them from danger. Maybe, in some quiet household, they are smiling, a smile never captured by media, yet very real, shining in a place we've yet to find. Survival doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it breathes in silence, in the careful footsteps, the quiet hands that may have guided these children through something we still don't fully understand. We don't have the right to draw conclusions, nor do we have the right to give up, because these children are still part of this world until proven otherwise. And if there is even the slightest chance that Lilly and Jack are out there, somewhere, safe and waiting to be seen, then we have a responsibility to keep looking. Because hope is not passive, it is action. It is the voice of millions saying, "We're not done yet." This case has no period at the end, and maybe, just maybe, because of the persistence of those we found them.